Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And it's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, board-certified criminal lawyer. I am board-certified by the National Board of Trial Advocacy and by the Minnesota State Bar Association as a criminal trial specialist and a criminal law specialist, which means I go to trial. It's what I do. But before we get into what we're going to talk about today, as always, this episode is brought to you by eForms.com. eForms.com. When you need a legal form for whatever purpose, let's say you're trying to get a sales agreement with somebody, you're selling somebody a car and you want a bill of sale so you can prove the sale. Go to eForms.com. They have that kind of thing. Or let's say you want to kick your grandmother out of your basement because she's cooking meth and she's just really creating havoc for you. So you go to eForms.com, you can get an eviction form. And they have them for every state. So don't pay a guy like me to reinvent the wheel, because guess where I'd go? I'd probably just go to eForms.com anyway. So save yourself some money. Go to eForms.com. Now, today we're reacting to Darrell Brooks. I got a copy of the complaint, and I want to talk about the complaint and kind of the antics of what he's doing. So this is a guy that let's just go through the charges. He's charged with a lot of different counts. He's charged with first-degree intentional homicide, first-degree intentional homicide, first-degree intentional homicide. So basically five different counts of first-degree intentional homicide. And basically, it's about him driving through an area and intentionally running people over in Waukesha, Wisconsin. And I still don't know why he did what he did. But before we get into any kind of motive or anything like that, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Michael Rivers, our content genius. He's the one that got this complaint and is putting up these clips, so can't do anything without him. He's my son. He's my number one guy, and I think you guys in the comments should share a little bit of love with him, because he's also the purveyor of my pearl handle pistol cufflinks that I wear with pride. So let's kind of go in. We're going to react to his closing argument, and I'll jump around a little bit so we can talk about what he's doing and why he's doing it. But one of the things about, now remember, he's a pro se. Was pro se mean? That means he's representing himself. And when somebody represents themselves, it's kind of interesting because, a defendant does not have to testify. And if a defendant, you have the Fifth Amendment right, absolutely not to testify, and nobody can infer anything from somebody remaining silent. Okay? But what does he get to do? If he remains silent and doesn't testify, he gets to get up and give a closing argument. So he gets to argue his case and not be subject to cross-examination. Now, he can't get up there and say what he would have said if he were to testify, but the judge would give him a lot of latitude because it is argument. And so it is a way around it. So let's kind of see what he had to say.
May I ask the court to consider perhaps an alternative, and I fully respect the ruling the court has just made, and I understand the basis for it. We all know the defendant, in his petulance, will say jury nullification in the first 3 seconds the jury's in the room.
Objection to that.
Proper.
So what the prosecutor is trying to preempt is, so sometimes when you kind of anticipate that the opposing party is going to do something, you raise what's called a motion in limine. In other words, I know the prosecutor is going to go here, and I think it's objectionable, and I don't want to raise that in front of the jury, so I bring it up in front of the judge.
Going that far yet, because
I'm certainly willing to try it in this courtroom.
Frankly, you have told them, and you will tell them that closing arguments are not evidence.
And then have them present from the other courtroom would be the second step, and then third would be a forfeiture.
So I know it's going to require...
So what the judge is saying there is, okay, we're going to try it this way with him in the courtroom,
for the court,
and if he goes outside, a pro se defendant, somebody who represents themselves, who's not a lawyer, they're held to the same standard that anybody else would be if they were a lawyer. So they have to abide by the same rules of conduct, same rules of law, and same rules of procedure. And when they stray out of that, it's objectionable. And if it gets so bad that the judge is saying, we'll put him in the other courtroom, and so they can mute him, And then if that doesn't work, then he forfeits his right to give the closing argument.
Your Honor, I object to that.
And he's objected to everything at every turn.
Your objection is noted for the record. That will be the course of action that this court takes. The first time you violate the rule, you may be subject to forfeiting the right to be present, where you will give the closing argument from the other courtroom. And if you continue in blatant disregard of the requirement that you not reference in any way jury nullification, I may make that final determination outside the presence of the jury.
I object to that, Your
And
Honor.
so, jury nullification, you really can't ask for jury nullification. I don't even think it's even close to being a danger, but it's against the rules.
To that, Your Honor.
Right, with that, let's bring it
For
out.
the record, I respectfully request the legal consideration of your ruling. So is that a tacit agreement that you don't have to answer my objection, Your Honor?
I decline to reconsider.
I reject that ruling and take exception to that ruling, Your Honor.
Taking exception to a ruling
For the
doesn't
record,
mean a damn
I
thing.
request a legal or factual basis for your ruling, Your Honor.
Denied.
And here's the thing: I think she just asked for the jury to come back in, and so it's kind of a tense time because it's all of a sudden you're supposed to do your closing argument, and he's kind of being whatever. So he's a loose cannon. She doesn't know what he's going to do in front of that jury.
For the record, may I respectfully request a written judicial finding of facts and conclusion of law on this issue, Your Honor.
Denied.
For the record, may I respectfully request a written judicial finding of facts and conclusion of law on this issue, Your Honor.
I'm not the court to address that.
For the record, may I respectfully move for
Well,
an
and
interlocutory
so I guess
declaratory
he knows
appeal
some
on this
law,
matter.
right? But the interlocutory appeal, that's something you bring up to the Court of Appeals.
For the record, may I move to stay these proceedings until this matter is adjudicated by a court of competent jurisdiction. This court has no subject matter jurisdiction.
Denied.
Under,
The jury-
based on what law or fact?
Please.
Based on what law or fact?
Because I'm going to inform the jury of their power. They deserve to know.
So he's forecasting that he's going to ask for jury nullification.
Stand up!
Hey Google, take a selfie.
Stand up! When I move, you move.
Just like that. My friend used to pay $163 for car insurance.
I don't think she
Now
did.
look how much he pays.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Go ahead, Mr. Brooks, your closing argument, please.
So at this point, the state has already given their closing argument, which I'm sure was heartfelt. The defense now gets a chance to do their closing argument, and then the state would have the right to rebuttal.
Good afternoon. It's been a long day. First off, I'd like to start by letting you guys know that it's a lot of information that you guys should be privy to, I believe. And
Now, if I'm the judge, it's like you are like on a 7-second delay, like when somebody swears on TV, and they're like, okay, we're going to give him a very short leash because we don't know what the fuck he's going to say.
one thing that I believe that you have not been privy to is the truth of your rights and your duties. Being the jury, the fact that you and you alone have the power.
It's getting close.
Well-prepared DAs with well prepared and clearly rehearsed speeches and exhibits and a lot of theatrics.
And evidence. They have all this evidence. Don't pay attention to the evidence.
Frankly, not the judge. You and you alone have the power. You and you alone decide what is truth and what isn't truth. You should be informed that you have the power.
See the look on that prosecutor's face? I guarantee you, she fucking hates this guy and wants this trial to be over and wants him convicted and put away as soon as possible.
To nullify any law that you don't agree with.
Uh-oh.
Objection, move to strike the statement.
Sustained.
Objection.
I will strike from the record the last.
So when somebody says something like, he was just told not to do this. This guy doesn't give a flying F of what to do. You know, I mean, he's just going to do what he wants to do. And he's been doing that throughout this whole trial.
Statement made by the defendant. The jury will disregard it.
Which is clearly what I've been saying. You be privy to all knowledge, not knowledge that certain people feel that you should hear and shouldn't hear, disguised under the color of law.
Disguised under the color of law.
The fact of the matter is, just like I did with my opening statements, I don't have a well-prepared or rehearsed speech.
He should.
I didn't look in the mirror and say certain points to myself over and over again and make sure I have them right or anything like that. I've chosen to speak from the heart in my opening statements, and now I'm going to speak from the heart. What you won't hear me do is argue facts.
You won't hear me argue. You know why you won't hear me argue facts? Because they're so bad for my case. I mean, that's the only thing you're supposed to do in a closing argument.
And the reason you won't hear me argue facts is because I believe that it takes away from what should be recognized.
What should be
The
recognized?
tragedy of this event. It should be recognized.
He fucking drove the car.
Trying to argue facts of this, facts of that, I'm not going to waste your time doing that.
So we got another like 51 minutes here. But we're not going to play the whole thing. Just
It's hard to keep everything together emotionally. And honestly, I don't believe that I have any more tears left. It's been a hard year.
kind of insensitive for him to talk about his own tears.
Mostly. And that should not be lost on anyone. It shouldn't be taken away. I said it before and I'll say it again. It's a lot of people that are healing, that are attempting to heal. That opens the door to talk about forgiveness for a little bit. With every healing process, there comes a forgiving process. It's not an easy thing for anyone.
There's nothing in the law that allows for forgiveness. Mitigation, maybe, but there's no mitigation
What
here.
you've been hearing from the prosecution, and not to take anything away from them, but let's call it what it is. You've been hearing a lot of rerun. Same things over and over and over. No different than when you turn.
And that's actually a prosecutorial technique where you have the same message being put forth by a number of different witnesses. When you hear the same thing over and over again from multiple sources, you're more likely to find it true. I do the same thing in some of my cases.
Radio and you first hear that song that you don't like when you first hear it, but they play it so much that eventually you start saying it, the words to yourself before
There's
you even realize it.
some truth to what he's saying
And
there.
then you sit and you go, I hate that song. Why am I singing it?
That's what's been happening. Rerun. Over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Attempting to make things stick in your head that simply aren't true. Why do I say, what am I saying? I say, look at the testimony. You know, the theme from the prosecution here has been intent, 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 intent. We all know what's been said. We all know the picture that's been painted. Even the prosecution said themselves. How can you look in somebody's head and say, this is what they intended to do? You know, for a year, I've sat and gone through this. Feeling so powerless. You know, letting other people run with the narratives. Sitting back helpless while other people paint a picture that has zero truth. Zero. I understand about healing myself, tragedy, pain, all that. A lot of it, there's no need to get into. I myself in my own life have had to do a lot of healing.
So one of the reasons we're watching this is so you can kind of see the process at work. You know, you hear this guy who's just been, you know, he seems a little forlorn now. But he's been in trial quite a long time. And it's honestly a situation where he is about to do multiple life sentences.
For myself. I find it hard to believe that anyone who's really had conversations with me, spent time around me, would think for 1 second that this is an intentional act. I've never heard of someone
focusing on intent is probably the smartest and the only thing he can do. That's the only thing he can argue.
Trying to hurt someone while attempting to blow their horn. While attempting to alert people of their presence. Which brings me to more information that I believe that you should have been privy to.
I mean, it's not a difficult case.
The prosecution will beg to differ, but the fact of the matter is, the vehicle in question, make and model of 2010, Ford Escape. The vehicle in question, actually 2008, 2009, and 2010 of that model was in fact recalled.
Objection, misstatement of the facts, facts not in evidence.
Was in fact
argument, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Was in fact recalled.
So a lot of times when you misstate, or you can only argue what the evidence is. So if he's arguing that the vehicle that he was driving was recalled and somehow it's the vehicle's fault, he can't argue that if that wasn't part of the case. In other words, if the evidence wasn't there, he can't argue that. And the judge can either sustain the objection or just admonish the jury that they should remember the facts as they recall.
Was in fact a class action lawsuit against Ford
Objection.
for those model vehicles.
Sustained, the jury will disregard.
Information that you should have been privy to, that you weren't allowed to be privy to. Why? I don't know.
So he's still referring to something that was just objected to and sustained. See, the judge is telling him to move on because it was objected to and sustained, so he can't talk about it anymore. But if he continues to violate the court's order, guess what? He's going to wind up in the other room.
You should have been privy to. The DA says the defendant has an utter disregard for human life. Utter disregard for human life. Not realizing that they're talking about someone that has children. Talking about someone that watched their children come out of the womb and be born into this world, cut the umbilical cord, held them before their mom even did.
So he probably didn't testify to this stuff, but that's what I'm talking about. When you have a pro se defendant who doesn't testify and then talks about this kind of stuff. When you drive a fucking car into a crowd of people, not giving a flying fuck who you run over or why you run over them, that's a problem. And that is an utter disregard for human life.
They made reference to a rage. As if they were if this particular DA was right there, standing right there.
It's on video. People
as if
can
this
see.
DA is a psychiatrist. I said to myself, what rage? What do you mean rage? How can you characterize that? How can you have the audacity to diagnose what someone's brain is? Where it's at, what it's thinking, why it thinks the way it does.
And that's a good point. How can you get into somebody's mind and figure out what their intent was? Because that's a very subjective thing, right? To get into somebody's mind and to know what they were thinking at the time the crime was committed. Well, you can't do that. Obviously, you can't get into their brain and download what they were thinking. But what you can do is infer what they were thinking or what their intent was, by the facts that are surrounding the crime itself.
Yes. DA makes references to blocks of no one being injured, but then says it's intentional.
The uninjured people don't fucking matter. What matters is the people that you ran over. And he's arguing the facts. I thought he said we weren't going to hear much about the facts.
You add that up with the supposed rage, the supposed intent to harm and kill, and it doesn't kick in until well within blocks. And maybe it's just me, but I would think if I was characterizing someone with this intent to kill and this rage and this anger, then why weren't people immediately harmed? Why would someone with intent to kill and rage try to alert people of their presence, repeatedly honk their horn? You heard a detective, if you recall, testify that the vehicle that he observed was not only honking his horn, but was not speeding. So where does this rage kick in? Where does this insatiable intent to kill kick in?
Now, according to the complaint, multiple citizens witnessed who were present during the. One witness said, "As I continued to watch the SUV, it continued to drive in a zigzag motion. It was like the SUV was trying to avoid vehicles, not people. There was no attempt made by the vehicle to stop, much less slow down, as it continues to hit people."
Someone who's known someone for years. Which brings me back to the vehicle. What if the vehicle couldn't stop because of the malfunction?
Objection, fact, not in evidence.
What if the driver of the vehicle was unable to stop the vehicle? Because of that fact, what if the driver may have panicked? Does that make the driver a crazed, or not crazed, a rage? Does that make the driver in a rage and intent on killing people? DA played exhibit 17. You don't see anyone struck in that vehicle. On that exhibit, you don't see anyone struck.
But you know there were people that were struck.
Was someone who had this intent to kill, this rage, as she says. If that was their intent, wouldn't they have taken the opportunity to hit as many people as they could?
And that's the thing that strikes me odd about this case, because I can't understand why he would do this. You know, I don't understand what is... It just doesn't make sense why somebody would do this unless they're just crazed, enraged, you know, and in some kind of state. Maybe he was on drugs. I don't know.
Target people, mow down people.
He did mow down people. That's the problem.
Reference was made to this vehicle, the damage. Says this was all caused by bodies, but then later turns around and says hits barricades and other objects. I've heard testimony about hearing loud crashes.
Well, the blood on the bumper probably is a giveaway that something bad happened and that he did it.
And things of that nature, but the DA wants you to believe that this all came from people. Evidence doesn't support that.
Arguing the evidence.
So I go back to trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened in the last year.
Now, he's been in custody this whole time, so it's been almost a whole year. That this, I think, was in November, and now it's October, almost November. So he's been in custody for a year.
Praying for those families, praying for the people that tragically lost their life, because that should not be lost either. The fact that there was lives lost, and all the emphasis has been put on the alleged defendant.
All the emphasis putting on me. Why would you do such a thing? Here's the thing. You killed people. That's why you're the star of this show.
And the people have been disregarding. Makes me wonder, does the DA even care about those people?
Look at the look. That's what we call RBF. Resting bitch face. Look at that look on that prosecutor. She hates this guy with a passion.
There's been prayers going up every day. It's been suffering on both sides.
There's been suffering on both sides. What does that mean? Because he's in jail and he's being accused of a crime, he's been suffering? He's not a victim. And when you play the victim card in a case where you got 5 other death victims and multiple other people who have gotten injured, it's a little insensitive.
It's been threats, hate mail. Because of the narratives that's been put out there.
The narrative. What's the narrative? It's threats and because you fucking killed 5 people. That's the narrative. And it's not a false narrative.
Misconceptions that have been put out there. The lies that have been put out there. Lies that have caused my children not to be able to go to school. To be bullied. For my mother to have to leave her home and stay at a hotel because she's afraid for her safety. Because she is hate mail shoved through her mailbox. My niece,
And the prosecutor's right to object as little as possible.
my nieces and nephews fear for their safety. And what's been equally hard is not only having to answer questions from my daughter who was 7 at the time, my baby girl who was 7 at the time, is now 8. Attempting to answer her questions that she's asking and still continue to shield her from what she sees, what she hears. Having a newborn son that I haven't even been able to meet.
Because I killed 5 people. I mean, what the fuck?
Whose fault is that?
Yeah. Because I killed 5 people. I mean, whose fault is it the fact that he hasn't been able to meet his son? I mean, or his baby, girl, or whatever, his baby, new baby.
I haven't been able to hold, touch, kiss.
They'll make arrangements for that in prison.
Having to navigate everything that comes with this whole situation. While still attempting to wrap my head around it. I can't honestly say how many times I've sat in my cell, especially during lights out, alone, where it's just you.
It's a lonely place.
And just been praying and asking myself, how could this happen? Not just for the people, but for everybody involved, the community too. How could this happen? How the hardest questions you can ask is those that don't have an answer.
I don't know. We're about halfway into this now, and I'm convinced. I'm convinced he didn't act with intent, and they should just let him go. Don't you think? No, not so much.
No matter how much thinking you do, no matter how much you try to look at it from different perspectives and listen to other outside perspectives and listen to people that you trust and that you love, still coming up with nothing. But to think for 1 second, one question I never had to ask was if this was intentional. That's something that I never asked once. Because I know it wasn't.
You know, for all of his antics, I'm surprised he's not a little more animated. But you know why? Because he sees that freight train coming. And it's coming around the bend. And it's going to take him right to Folsom Prison. Well, not Folsom Prison, but you know what I mean.
Everything you've heard in opening statements, everything you're hearing now is from right here. Everything. You and you alone. All of you. You have the decision.
That's one of the arguments that sometimes I make, is that, you know, if the judge makes a mistake, we can fix that. If a lawyer makes a mistake, there's a remedy for that. But the jury, and the jury alone, is in charge of the decision here. And if the jury makes a mistake, if you make a mistake as a juror, there's no remedy for that.
I'm sure you've taken a lot of notes during this process. Some days are longer than others. A lot of movement in and out of the courtroom for various reasons.
A lot of moving me in and out of the courtroom for various reasons. Yeah, your antics. You can't just do whatever the fuck you want to do.
I can never understand the position of sitting on the jury in something of this magnitude. So I'm sure there's a lot of pressure.
I argued that in my last case, because I tried a homicide in a small town, and one of the arguments I made to the jury is that if at any time you feel like you can't render a verdict and hold your head up high in town, you need to recuse yourself as a juror.
I pray that the right decision is made. The right decision. Go inside yourself when making this decision.
Go inside yourself.
Think about everything you've heard. Think about everything you haven't been privileged to hear.
Now, here he goes back to talking about evidence that's not in the case. You can't think about things that you haven't heard. There's a specific rule against it. You can only consider what's in the evidence at the time of the trial.
And above everything, whatever you decide, make sure you yourself can live with it.
Oh, no trouble here. I think I'm going to convict your ass in about 2.8 seconds, and I'm going to go to the bar, and I'm going to have a, glad I don't have to listen to that son of a bitch anymore. Here's the thing. He, for all of his antics, the judge finally has him reined in, right? Because the judge says, I'm going to give you 3 opportunities. The first time you break my rules, I'm going to put you in the other room. And the second time you break my rules, you're going to forfeit your right to have a closing argument. So he wanted to stay in that room. He's behaving now, finally, on the last day of trial.
Make sure you can live with it. Yeah. That's the magnitude of the power that you have. Just like this tissue is in my hand, this is everything. You have everything. Be at peace with what you decide.
No trouble here. See you later, buddy. Fuck.
Have no regrets. Don't let this decision weigh on you after it's over.
Not a bad sentiment, actually.
Hopefully we got a long
Lot of living ahead of us. Lord willing. Don't look back and kick yourself in the behind.
I don't think there's any danger of that happening.
It's been about 3 weeks with you.
3 weeks. It was a 3-week trial. And why was it a 3-week fucking trial? Here's the thing. I guarantee you that jury's a little pissed at him for dragging this out as long as they did. 3 weeks. It probably was a case that could have been tried easily in a week.
It took a lot of courage and a lot of guts to pause your life for this. To put important things on hold, to basically stop your life. You should be commended for being able to sit up here with this amount of pressure. I want you guys to know that's not lost on me. I'm sure it's a lot.
You know, that's actually something that you do common when you argue to a jury. You kind of thank them for their service. You understand this is a sacrifice. I mean, it is. So, I mean, he's saying some good things here, but he doesn't have any argument, really.
You all should be commended because it took courage to do this.
He's being respectful and coherent, which is what he has not been throughout these proceedings at all.
And you guys had the guts to do it. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking pretty much a month and setting it to the side for this.
Now we got a minute left. Let's come on, finish with some fire and brimstone. We need a little something here, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you guys sincerely, and I know, and I have faith and I trust that you guys know what's right. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think it's fair to just say guys, but
Come on, don't disappoint me. Call the judge a name, call the prosecutor a name.
I believe in your heart you know what's right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So now that he's done, they have rebuttal. So we're not going to go into the state's rebuttal because it is what it is. What is she going to rebut on this? She's not going to rebut a whole lot because he didn't really say much. But he just gave an hour-long summation that really was just a rambling, just don't convict me because because of what, the car malfunction, but that's not in evidence, so you can't consider it. But basically nullification. So this was our reaction to Darrell Brooks' closing argument, and breaking news, he was convicted on all counts. All right, so this has been our reaction to Darrell Brooks' closing argument. Now we have, and I haven't really talked about it too much, but we've got some hats. We've got, check this out, ladies and gentlemen. These are our new hoodies. See these CLR hoodies. We got bucket hats. We got T-shirts. We got trucker hats. We got all kinds of stuff. Look at the bonfire link down below. It's getting close to Christmas, so why don't you start your shopping early and get merch? And because represent, we got to get the word out there. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers with content genius Michael Rivers. And big shout out to Jaylap and to Percy Mack for our intro and our outro. And we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. 23-hour lockdown, please just at my